Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to my live stream. This episode will be about what kind of truth can I tell us. Please allow me to walk you through what I'd like to cover today. I'd like to have 4 bullet points covered. First of all, I'd like to talk about the scope of application settings I'm going to talk about today. So just to give you a range, what kind of settings, what kind of applications we're talking about. And secondly, I'd like to talk or elaborate on what is a bit fuzzy about the truth, actually, because when you want to predict something, then you always have a notion of truth in mind, and there are many interesting details about how you actually construct or understand the truth. And the question, when there is not one single notion of truth, always is, how do you pick between different, say, definitions of the truth? And this is something which applies for human intelligence as well as for artificial intelligence in a way. I'd like to elaborate on that in the third part, and I'll propose some ideas how HR department could facilitate a productive interaction between human and artificial intelligence. So let's dig deeper or dig right into it by elaborating on the scope of application settings for today. First of all, the easiest way to use artificial intelligence for sure is when you want to guess, propose, and correct user data in an interactive way. So think, for example, that you have to enter an address and you're going to validate the zip codes which are entered interactively. This is kind of a piece of cake. Everyone knows that, and many people wouldn't even consider this an artificial intelligence task. So this is the easiest way to, say, use artificial intelligence to our service or to make things easier for us. When we dig a bit deeper, then we reach some optimization tasks in well-defined settings. That sounds a bit abstract, and I'd like to elaborate on what I have in mind when I talk about these things. Think, for example, you have a sales force with 12 sales agents, and you have 25 new customers or potential customers, and you want to assign the customers to the sales agents. This is also quite an easy task in a way, because there are numerous possibilities how you can assign each customer to each sales agent. So there are numerous possibilities. And the main task which is served by the artificial intelligence actually is that you propose some assignment, and usually this is kind of validated on the fly within the software. So for example, there is some proposition of you have sales agent A and you have the customers 1, 2, 7, 9, and 12. And the other customers are assigned to the other sales agents in a similar way. And then you somehow scoot the change the assignment and finally approve it. And then you have got your assignment from customers to sales agents. So what these settings have in common is that they are called low-stakes settings, and they are kind of a bot-fashioned user support. So there is some tedious task, for example, to guess what that human actually wanted to type, or to guess or to make a predefined solution of how the sales agent can be assigned to the customers. And then you offer this to a human so that the data entry is less tedious. It's less of a hassle. It's a low-stakes setting because the AI proposes a solution and humans pick what they consider correct, or they enter new data. And this also already implies that there is some loop structure going on implicitly. You have some proposition made by the artificial intelligence, and this is validated on the fly or changed by the human being. There, it's very easy because artificial intelligence only serves as an assistant and humans stay in charge of what actually and finally happens. things become a bit more difficult when we talk about high stakes settings. And that's the part where things are actually, it's a bit more difficult to discuss, and where the notion of the truth actually is becoming a bit fuzzy. Think, for example, that you have an employee's or prospective employees' curriculum vitae, and what many software solutions kind of promise is that they can predict the future development of the employee from these sparse data. So you upload some sort of, or a number of CVs, and you predict the employee's future development from these data. This is for sure, this is a high stakes setting, because actually it's not like in the on-the-fly validated examples before, but here you predict some sort of future, and this future even affects humans. And so this is for sure a high stakes setting. If you think about that, think how many discussions you can imagine how to do this properly, how to tell from CV data whether an employee is well apt for some position in question, whether he or she will develop within the right direction, and so on and so on. So there are many things to discuss about, even when humans would be doing this task. And it becomes even harder when you try to assign the task to a computer. And when you assign the task to a computer, then it becomes completely obvious what is fuzzy about a momentarily notion of the truth. But just as a say way of triggering some creativity, I'd like to think about this as if it was the exact same thing, no matter whether humans would take the decisions or artificial intelligence would take the decision. And there are some characteristics to this kind of high stakes setting, or to this proposed setting, which are a bit more difficult to elaborate on. So I will cover those in some of these points here. First of all, please keep in mind that the available data don't cover reality in full depths. This is a very important point, because we tend to look at, for example, a CV and kind of seem to believe we somehow know something about the person who issued this curriculum vitae. But it's only a snapshot, a momentarily snapshot of a very, very sparse aspect of all the data which are theoretically available. So you don't have the employee in question on your sheet or at this sheet, but only the curriculum vitae about him or her. Secondly, predictive models you can use to guess from this sheet of paper how successful the employee will be in the near or further future never offer 100% certainty. That's also very important to keep in mind, because there are flaws in each model you use. And that's the third point, numerous competing predictive models with different predictions. So there are some rules of thumb. For example, if you think about an HR department and someone whose task is to review curriculum vitae, then usually they have their own rules of thumb, and no one really knows, unless it's a very, very, say, dedicated employee. No one really knows which rules actually are in action when you make predictions out of the CV. So what we have to do is, when we have some competing predictive models, be it in humans or within humans, or be it in artificial intelligence predictions, then we implicitly have to pick one, or we have to combine several predictions of those. That's another problem which makes the notion of the truth a bit fuzzy. Fourth point is the data from which we derive the knowledge, actually, from which we derived, be it the rule that there is no gap allowed in the curriculum vitae, like each education has to be immediately followed by some work placement, by something else, and so on and so on. This is a typical rule of thumb, which actually has not so much proof that it's actually a valid rule. And the same thing might apply to rules of thumb which are derived or invented by a computer. And these data, not only the rules are fuzzy, or the rules are unclear whether they are actually correct or not, whether they are actually helpful or not, or whether they might have, for example, some very, very bad side effects. Not only the rules have a problem, but also there are plenty of them which may be competing and have different predictions. And at the same time, the data from which we gathered that knowledge and kind of invented that rule is rapidly aging. So usually the data is already outdated once the rule is present. And you don't know whether actually new data would follow, or would follow a more actual, a more current competing rule set of rules how to predict the future success from the CV data. So the data are subject to aging. And there is a fifth point, which is even more difficult or more hard to tell, is the model drift. What's considered correct at some point of time is not necessarily correct, say, 5 days later, perhaps even 10 minutes later. It might be already outdated. The model, the implicit model from which you estimate the truth or make a prediction of the truth out of the data, which are already outdated, might also be not current anymore. So there are plenty of things which make the truth actually a bit fuzzy. So in a way, we only know that we don't know anything, okay, but the question is, how does human intelligence deal with that problem? Because as I outlined before, we all suffer from exactly this problem. We, meaning humans and computers in a way. So what do they do when they face fuzzy data and have to make decisions based on these data? Usually they talk about it. And the great thing about this is that you can compare in a group what are personal ideas about future success, or what are, for example, the official ideas about future success, and so on and so on. So when the situation becomes a bit fuzzy, and when the number of predictions becomes actually large, then it is easier for humans to kind of interact with each other and build some notion of the truth in a group as a social process, which is a very, very interesting thing when that happens. And I have to admit that I like humans a lot. That's what makes humans a great species, because what they can do is they can be creative. They can invent heuristics and rules of thumb when they don't really know how to decide. Usually they make something up. They make something up, and from that point on, they tend to defend it in a group. That's a very, very interesting process. And this, enhances creativity a lot. And when they disagree in a group about a prediction of, for example, how to guess whether employee A would be a good catch or not, then and when they disagree about that, they tend to talk and sometimes even fight about that, and kind of implicitly elaborate on the rules which were in place. And the third point is they can also explain to each other the reasons why they came up with a certain decision. Sometimes these reasons are, say, only an invention. Sometimes they have, say, a very valid background. But what people can do is they can talk about this. They can talk about this and, for example, vote for the one correct solution out of the group. This makes humans a great species because they can adapt quite quickly to new circumstances. And they can, before they do so, before they come to a decision, they can explicitly criticize and challenge each other's implicit models. And this is what happens very often in HR departments, when people say, discuss whether they want to assign employee A to position B, and so on and so on. There are always discussions happening, and that's a good thing because it makes us even more adaptive. So, and now the idea I'd like to present is, what if, or what should we do in order to allow HR department to go into a productive interaction with artificial intelligence, so that when we gather the benefits, or when we combine the benefits of human intelligence and the artificial intelligence, how can we combine that actually? And there we are facing some current problems right now, because at first, to me, it feels like the artificial intelligence development is currently considered more of a data science task. It's done by these guys who program, it's done by these guys who can code, and so on and so on. And we try to not go too much into detail when we talk about the nitty-gritty details, and so on and so on. So the result of this is that the AI models which are readily available usually work as black boxes. No one can know how or why they make a certain decision, or why they propose a certain decision. And on the other hand, the HR practitioners and also the behavioral sciences gathered a lot of knowledge how this kind of difficult optimization task is to be done properly, or should be made. So there is a lot of knowledge, there is a lot of experience from practitioners and from science parts, how this should be done. But on the other hand, we are confronted with some black box models which propose some sort of decision but don't tell why. I always feel reminded of this nice episode of Little Britain where the lady kind of types something in the computer and says, "The computer says no." And this is kind of it. There is nothing else happen, and there is no discussion about this. And that's what actually makes humans, in a way, superior with regard to their adaptivity, because they can interact more efficiently among individuals and kind of build new rules as a species, as a group of people. And now the idea I'd like to present to you is, what if HR proposed rules and concepts as a possible, which a possible AI support needs to adhere to? So this, in the very, very end, could lead to, we would be able to understand why artificial intelligence actually came to a certain decision. We could question the black box, or the veil would be lifted, why this decision or this proposition was made. But that would require that there are some humans who say, no, we have the artificial intelligence adhere to certain standards we define, and the software has to follow these standards, or to abide by these rules, so that there is some structure which allows for humans to interact with the whole thing. What would happen? What would happen if humans could ask artificial intelligence why it made a certain decision? You can understand, or you can imagine, that would actually make the artificial intelligence kind of a co-worker in this setting. So this could be a very interesting thing, that, for example, humans would make some propositions, utter some ideas why some decision would have to be made, and then you could also talk to the artificial intelligence why it made some decisions. This is a long way ahead, I guess, until this will happen. But I think there are some structures which can be set right now, or which can be thought about right now, so that human resource and humans in general have the opportunity, or the possibility, to stay in charge and not be, say, replaced by some artificial intelligence, which does some things right, perhaps for a certain amount of time. Just remember the part where we were talking about how quickly data and models become outdated. And usually when you look into this black box and you accept that it works, then you define a rule. You don't really know how it is in detail working, but you accept it and kind of define the new truth by it. And you don't allow for a productive discussion or criticism. So the idea of defining an interface to comply or to define rules of an interface the artificial intelligence has to comply with includes this idea of truth snapshots. And what I like about the idea of truth snapshots, meaning there is not one single truth, but only a momentarily snapshot of the truth. What I like about this is that it also untaboos the discussion among humans. Because usually when you, or sometimes it happens, when you try to talk to people about their implicit rules which are in action, then actually they tend to defend themselves a lot because they feel threatened. If someone questions, why are you doing this? Why do you think a gap within the curriculum vitae actually plays a role for the quality or for the further sales, for the expectable sales outcome of the person or something like that? Why do you think that? Usually this is a moment when you criticize someone where some defense goes up. And my idea of truth snapshots is when we think that this is kind of our interface to an artificial intelligence where we can question why a certain decision was made, then of course you can use this structure also to have a very, very easily done discussion with your colleagues about what kind of rules they engage or have in action. And so you can do the same thing, or you can do all the things which I like so much about humans. You can criticize each other, you can discuss, you can perhaps make a new rule out of 2 or 3 rules, and so on and so on. And the great thing about this is that it actually alters the adaptability of the whole system a lot. So the species or the company actually becomes a lot more adaptable once you have some common ground of knowledge where you can share things between human intelligence and the artificial intelligence. Just one idea of how such a truth snapshot could look like could be that you have a set of data which you rely upon. So it's just a snapshot, and the definition only says which data or which information were available when I induced my model I was talking about. Which criteria will we use to check if the prediction the model did was correct at that point of time? And for how long do we consider the prediction to be valid? So how long is the when is the expiration date? And of course, we would have to say or to tell whether we talk about high or low stakes decisions. So how much fuzziness is acceptable in the outcome? Just to refer back to our introductory example with the CV prediction, it would be not favorable if you used the curriculum vitae prediction model to make a, say, first guess of people who might be actually suitable for the position in question, and with a flawed model, you would exclude many people who could be very, very well apt for this position in question in a later step. But that's the problem of the decision chains, that sometimes you get rid of possible successful candidates in a very, very early step because you have a pre-selection which works based on models which are not valid. And so you kind of kick all the people out who would be well apt in a later step, but they won't come so far because the later step is the more expensive step, and then you don't take it, and so on and so on. And when you rely too much on the pre-selection model, then you kind of step into a problem which actually become a very, very hard fairness problem. The great thing about such a truth snapshot concept would be that you could understand and discuss the underlying decision model, even if it is a artificial intelligence model among humans. So humans in a way could stay in charge because they can learn from the model if they agree with it, because they understand what happens inside, and they can criticize it and they can talk about this. And when they don't agree with that, they can also overrule the whole thing. So there is not a risk of being, say, replaced, but there is some forced way of interaction, which is a very, very nice opportunity, I believe. But this is just my idea or my take on these things. What I would like to know is, what are your thoughts with regard to this part? What do you think about this? How should we interact with artificial intelligence models, or should we just state, yeah, this is the devil's work and we're not going to do this and we're going to prevent this from happening, and so on and so on? Because the question actually is, will there be an opportunity for us to not let that happen? And I would love to discuss that with you. So if you have any thoughts with regard to that, please let me know and send me an email to livestream@eligo.de. Thank you very much so far. So if you like this live stream, please consider signing up at www. That was one W too much. So www.eligo.de/livestream to allow us to keep you updated. If you like the stream, please consider sharing it and bringing a friend the next time. Or if you know someone you would love to be interviewed here or featured here, let me know. Just contact Christian Montel at LinkedIn or send me an email at the same address. And please keep in mind, the next live stream is scheduled for Friday, 1st of March, 2024 at 2 p.m. Thank you very much. May you have a beautiful weekend and a nice rest of the day. It was a pleasure having you. I'm looking forward to your feedback. Have a good one. Bye-bye.